Good morning. This is Anna Patterson with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. We're going to go ahead and kick it off because we have a special guest with us today. We have Josh Walker from DHHS, the State North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. He's the Olmsted Housing Director, overseeing the health equity portfolio in the Office of the Secretary. Just a quick introduction for Josh before we launch into our conversation today. Josh has a combined 19 years of experience in human services, and in the last 7 years, he spent his time in housing and work with the Transitions to Community Living and Olmsted. He has a master's degree in community counseling and has been a licensed clinical mental health counselor since 2009. He previously served as a clinical director at a community-based agency overseeing behavioral-based enhanced services in the Medicaid area. And he previously served as the Transitions to Community Living lead and director at the East Point Managed Care Organization for 6 years. Josh joined the Department of Health and Human Services at the State Office of the Secretary in June of 2023 and currently serves as the Olmsted Housing Director. He believes that housing is healthcare and that through Housing First principles, individuals should have choice where they live, work, and play. Good morning, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Have you here today to talk a little bit about the released DHHS Strategic Housing Plan that came out at the end of August. But before we do that, could you tell us a little bit about your role at DHHS and launch into a bit about the process for developing the housing plan and kind of what it means?
Not a problem at all. My role at DHHS is to serve as the Olmsted Housing Director. What this means is that I'm overseeing the housing activities both for the Transition to Community Living Settlement Agreement and in general housing across individuals served by the Department of Health and Human Services. Regarding the Strategic Housing Plan, this plan has been a long time in coming. There was an environmental scan that was done about 2, maybe even 3 years ago. And then what happened was there was multiple work groups and gatherings of stakeholders, different people, advocates, continuum of care, homeless programs. We had the assistance of the Technical Assistance Collaborative to assist with the work throughout North Carolina. And in general, it was working together on areas that, as a state, that we identified that were very important to us. And from all of that work, we ended up with 5 different overarching goal areas. They are development, which is thankfully just exactly what it sounds like, getting more affordable housing out there. The plan calls for 3,400 affordable units to be created within this 5-year period, which is definitely something we're excited about. Non-development, which is going to be barriers to getting into housing. So it's the different pieces that affect ability for individuals to both access and then maintain housing, either through, well, there's a lot of stuff that involved, but it's in general, it's all about increasing the access for individuals. We've also got housing-related services. One of the things that North Carolina has been, I'm not sure if people know this, but North Carolina was selected as one of very few states to work with HUD and different federal partners in a housing partnership service accelerator. The idea behind this is to identify the different housing programs in states that are utilizing an 1115 waiver, which North Carolina does, and then identifying how, in general, can we work our services as well as our housing programs to be better for the individuals of North Carolina. One thing that I always like to point out here is that we did have a visit from the Assistant Secretary, Richard Cho, I'd say probably about a year ago now. And one of the things he identified when he visited and was able to learn from state partners, community partners, and different folks at the table was that he identified North Carolina, whether we realize it or not, is a unicorn out there because we're actually doing housing right. So I think that's always a good thing to make sure people understand is, especially for those in the weeds, that and sometimes it might not seem like it, but compared to the rest of the country, North Carolina is awesome. We're also going to be working with partnerships, identifying and helping people talk to each other and develop cohesive partnerships and working relationships between maybe like public housing authorities or working together with continuums of care or with your local management entity, managed care organization, or tailored plan, whatever happens to be the appropriate term for this month. And we've also got coordination and making sure that, because right now coordination is super important in North Carolina because we do not have a state housing department. The housing offices and the different work for the housing across North Carolina is literally spread across multiple areas. And one of the big things that we're going to be looking at through this strategic plan is to hopefully identify a common language there and identify if the feasibility of actually having a housing department at the state level to be able to centralize and coordinate all housing resources and activities.
Thank you, Josh. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the goals of this plan, and ultimately why should people understand why this plan is a big deal? Why does it matter?
Not a problem. So again, the goals is those 5 overarching areas with development, non-development, services, partnerships, and coordination. But in general, the goals and why does this matter? Because it provides a framework to consistently and cohesively talk about housing in North Carolina, one which is especially important when you're talking with politicians, people in authority, or people who control the purse strings. It'll also help North Carolina be accountable for steps we say we're going to achieve and accomplish in the housing space over the next 5 years. It also forms the backbone of partnerships and collaborations between stakeholders. I've already heard that LME MCOs are using the strategic plan as a jumping off point in order to engage with the public housing authorities and to have a communication ongoingly with these different entities. So it provides a jumping off point for collaboration and partnership throughout the stakeholders and across the state.
Perfect. And Ken, for the folks that are interested in learning more, we'll definitely have the plan linked in our call notes. So Josh, could you tell folks a little bit about how they could get involved or engaged and what they should look out for in the plan as they review it?
Not a problem. Right now we do have 5 work groups that are addressing the 5 goal areas of the plan, and these are currently meeting at a regular cadence. If anybody's interested in joining any of those work groups, they can email me, Josh Walker, at josh.walker@dhhs.nc.gov, and I will be the point person to coordinate with work group leads regarding additional members. I will say that right now we're looking to get a good representation, but we also are looking to keep the work groups manageable, because the last thing we need is this behemoth that's too big to get anything done. So we're trying to keep the membership for each of the work groups at a quote-unquote manageable level. But beyond that, quarterly, Department of Health and Services will also be hosting a Housing Leadership Committee call. The committee and the public are invited for that. That happens on a quarterly basis, and it is going to be, the link would then be posted on the same place as our state website, which I can provide the link for that, where the housing plan lives. And for there, the link would then get you onto when the Housing Leadership Committee is going to meet. What happens during that is that's going to be when each of the different work groups would then be reporting out regarding success, progress, different things that have been accomplished over the last quarter as far as housing-related pieces and the ability to move forward with the goals identified with the plan. During the HLC piece, there will be a time for both feedback from the committee, and there will also be a time for any individual who happens to be not on the committee but is a public individual who is interested. There will be a time also for public comment. One of the biggest things I want people to also understand is that this is going to be a 5-year plan, but it doesn't mean that everything is set in stone and that things cannot change. One of the things that the both work groups as well as the Housing Leadership Committee is going to be tasked with is to look again at the goals each year and making sure that the plan is still appropriate for what we're looking at and to address any significant major changes that might have come up over the last year and how that could affect the ability for the plan to both function and ensure that we're meeting the needs of the individuals in North Carolina.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure to include those links in our call notes and likely in our summary post about the strategic housing plan. And I know that we'll continue to engage in conversations in the coming weeks and in the coming years as the results of this plan and all the great work that comes from it starts to unfold.
No, absolutely. I definitely appreciate you guys having me and being able to explain about kind of what we're doing and why it's important for each of the individuals that happen to be on this call and across North Carolina in general.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
All right. I appreciate the invite, and you guys have a great morning and, awesome fall.
Wonderful. Really quick, everyone, we're going to just highlight a few other key announcements for you on our call before we hop off. This is the last week to provide feedback on our county profiles and different North Carolina Housing Coalition resources. Remember, we want your feedback. Obviously, we always, for the last 2 years, we've been kind of setting the timeline around county profile development, but you do have the opportunity to give feedback about other resources. And as always, we want to make sure that we develop a resource that is easy to understand, that's accessible. And so even if the data that you request or that you talk about does not end up on the county profile itself, it can end up on another resource or tool that we develop, because we want to make sure, again, that the information that we put out there and the resources that we create are relevant. We have a link to the survey in our call notes for you, as well as a gallery of past county profiles, just so you can see kind of where county profiles in terms of design and information, how they've looked over the years. Moving really quickly through some federal updates. Congressional leaders from both parties worked through this past weekend on a new continuing resolution to keep the government funded past September 30th, which is next week, and they are expected to pass a continuing resolution, which is really a routine stopgap, a CR, to keep the government running when Congress doesn't approve a year-long spending bill by the first day of the fiscal year, which is October 1st. Right now, the current proposed continuing resolution is going to keep funding at current levels through December 20th, which is the last day of the year that Congress is in session. House Speaker Mike Johnson introduced the bill in the House yesterday, and it was introduced yesterday and is expected to bring it to a vote as early as tomorrow, with the Senate likely to vote on it soon after. Based on the season, right, it's election season, and just with everything going on, both sides are really motivated to avoid a partial shutdown, so it's likely that we'll see something passed within the week. Another thing I wanted to highlight on the federal level is that HUD last week posted the Modernizing the Delivery of Housing Counseling Services final rule in the Federal Register. This change allows for HUD-approved housing counseling agencies to have a bit more flexibility in how they engage with and educate with home buyers and renters. In addition to meeting in person, housing counselors can now do virtual meetings and phone calls, and this rule really just want to point out is a win for expanding access to housing counseling for people who often have difficulty obtaining in-person services, whether that be due to linguistic or physical, geographic, or other barriers such as transportation and child care costs. Last but not least, just want to list up a few events that I hope that you all will consider taking part in. There is a event happening on September 24th titled A Webinar, Can Housing Policies Create Connections and Build Community? At 4 p.m., the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard will be doing that. And the Turner Center for Housing Innovation and Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality from 1 to 2 p.m. will be hosting a webinar on how expanding affordability can happen through a renter's tax credit. Another great resource, an event that I highly recommend if you are able, if your organization is able to send someone, it's an affordable housing seminar that will go over tools, strategies, and case studies for local government leadership, hosted by the UNC School of Government on October 4th, which is next Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and this will be in Chapel Hill. There is a cost. It's $260, and registration closes tomorrow. Last but not least, there is a Housing for All event, a community tour hosted by the Brevard Transylvania Housing Coalition on October 10th from 9:30 to 2 p.m. It is free, but registration is required, and this event is in recognition of World Homelessness Day 2024. The community is invited to participate in this event, the Housing for All Community Tour, and it's supposed to be an immersive event that allows folks to have the unique opportunity to explore how different local organizations in that area provide essential housing support, and from temporary shelter to long-term solutions for residents facing housing insecurity. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you again to Josh Walker for joining us for the conversation. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us this morning for our housing call. Just a quick reminder, if you can please hang up so that we can retrieve the recording of the call, we would appreciate it very much. Have a great day.